I was sitting at the dining table when my father pointed at the door and said, "You are a liability to this family name, and you are out of the will." His hand was shaking, not from emotion, from rage he was trying to control. He didn't ask who the father was. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just used my pregnancy as an excuse to get rid of me before I could ask the wrong questions. I didn't cry. I reached under my chair, pulled out a small cardboard box, and set it on his placemat. Inside were 3 years of loan notices, all in my name, all forged. Then I stood up, pulled my coat tight, and walked out into the snow. That box would destroy his life 7 years later. But I didn't know that yet. The first 2 weeks, I slept in my car. It was a Honda Civic with a broken heater and a passenger seat that wouldn't recline. I parked behind a 24-hour gym so I could use their bathroom in the morning. The air smelled like cold vinyl and French fries from the bag I kept under the seat. I was 6 months pregnant. My coat didn't button anymore. I had money for a deposit. I had a letter from my job at the payroll company. But every landlord ran my credit and then looked at me like I'd lied on the application. One woman, maybe 40, with reading glasses on a chain, stared at her screen and then back at me. She didn't say much, just shook her head and slid my deposit check back across the desk. "I can't rent to you," she said. "Your credit report is a disaster." I didn't argue. I just took the check and left. I finally found a man who owned a duplex near the rail yard. He didn't run anything. He just took cash and told me not to be late. The apartment had brown carpet and a window that didn't lock. But it was mine. I sat on the floor that first night with my back against the wall and made a promise to my daughter. I told her I wasn't a failure. I told her I wasn't a deadbeat. I told her the man who did this to us would answer for it. Not someday. When I was ready. I didn't go to college. I went to work. I started in collections at a regional credit agency, calling people who owed $600 on a furniture lease or won $200 on a medical bill. I was good at it. Not because I was mean, because I understood how debt worked. Debt isn't just about money. It's about control. After 2 years, I moved to a larger firm that bought distressed portfolios from banks. They would buy $50,000 in bad loans for $30,000 and then try to collect the full amount. Most people paid something, even if it was $5 a month. I learned how to read a balance sheet. I learned what banks were willing to sell and what they weren't. I learned that if you waited long enough, even a strong company would bleed if the interest kept running. By the time my daughter turned 4, I had saved $60,000 and started my own firm. I called it VM Holdings, Valerie Marie. I didn't advertise. I didn't have a website. I just called vice presidents at community banks and offered to take their problem loans off their hands. Quietly, quickly, for 60 or 70 cents on the dollar. They loved me. I worked out of a small office above a dental clinic. The walls were beige. The carpet smelled like nothing. I had one desk, one computer, and a file cabinet I kept locked. On my desk was a single-framed photo of my daughter, and underneath that photo was a sticky note with one name written on it, Gavin Hall, my father. I started tracking him 6 months after I opened the business, not for revenge, for information. I subscribed to the county recorder's office alerts. I set up Google notifications for his company name. I paid $40 a month for access to a commercial credit monitoring service that flagged any new filings, liens, or loan applications tied to GBU construction. His company had been around for 20 years. He'd built strip malls, medical offices, a few municipal projects. He was good at shaking hands. He was terrible at managing cash flow. The first sign of trouble came in March. A subcontractor filed a mechanic's lien for $48,000 on a project in Cranford. 2 months later, another lien, then another. I printed every document. I kept them in a folder labeled GBU Public Record. By summer, I could see the pattern. He was over-leveraged on 3 commercial developments that had stalled. The permits were delayed, the financing was structured badly, and the interest was compounding every month. He'd taken out bridge loans from 2 regional banks to cover payroll. Those loans were now 90 days past due. I didn't feel anything when I read the numbers. I just took notes. One afternoon in late September, I got a call from a man named Richard Kowalski. He was a senior vice president at First City Bank in Newark. His voice sounded tired. "Ms. Hall," he said, "I saw your name on a servicing agreement we sold last quarter. You handled it cleanly, no complaints." I waited. "I have a situation," he continued. "A commercial borrower, 3 notes, total balance around $310,000. He's missed 4 payments. We've sent demand letters. He keeps promising wire transfers that never come." "What kind of collateral?" I asked. "Heavy equipment, 2 excavators, a crane, some trucks, all listed on the UCC filing." "Have you verified the collateral recently?" There was a pause. "No," he admitted. "We don't have the staff for that anymore." I told him I'd review the file and call him back. He emailed me the loan documents 20 minutes later. I opened the PDF and saw my father's signature on page 12. I sat very still. Then I picked up my phone and called a repo service in Newark I'd worked with before. I asked them to drive by the address listed on the UCC filing and take photos of whatever equipment was on site. They sent me the pictures the next day. The lot was empty. Chain link fence, cracked asphalt, no excavators, no crane. The equipment had been repossessed 4 months earlier by a different lender. My father had pledged collateral he didn't own. I called Richard back. "I'll take the portfolio," I said. "All 3 notes, 60 cents on the dollar." He sighed with relief. "Thank you. I'll get the paperwork started." I hung up and stared at the photo of the empty lot on my screen. He'd done it again. Lied, forged, covered up his mistakes by using someone else's name. This time, it wasn't mine, but it was close enough. Over the next 4 months, I acquired 2 more loan portfolios tied to GBU Construction, one from a credit union in Princeton, one from a private lender in Montclair. I paid fair market value. I didn't strong-arm anyone. I just made quiet offers to people who were tired of chasing a man who wouldn't answer his phone. By January, I owned $450,000 of my father's debt. He had no idea. The loans were all held under VM Holdings. The correspondence came from my lawyer's office, Marcus Chen, a man I paid very well to be the face of every transaction. My father never saw my name. I kept working. I kept my daughter in a good daycare. I kept my apartment clean and my schedule predictable. On Sundays, I took her to the park. We fed the ducks. She asked me questions about clouds and why the swings always squeaked. I answered every question. At night, after she went to bed, I sat at my desk and updated the spreadsheet. Interest, penalties, compounding fees. The number kept growing. $450,000 became $462,000, then $471,000. I wasn't in a hurry. I was building a structure, and structures take time. In February, I had Marcus send a formal demand letter to GBU Construction. It was polite, professional. It outlined the total amount due and offered a restructuring option if Mr. Hall was interested in discussing terms. It gave him 10 business days to respond. He responded in 9. His lawyer called Marcus and asked if VM Holdings would be open to a meeting. He said Mr. Hall was very interested in resolving the matter and exploring a partnership moving forward. Marcus called me from his car. "He took the bait," he said. I was standing in my kitchen, wiping down the counter. My daughter was watching cartoons in the next room. "Set it up," I said, "but make it tight. Tell him the offer expires in 48 hours. I want him to feel the clock." "Understood." I hung up and rinsed the sponge under the faucet. Then I walked into the living room, sat down next to my daughter, and watched the rest of the cartoon with her. She leaned against my shoulder. I didn't move. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. Marcus rented a conference room in a midtown office building. 10th floor, glass walls, mahogany table. The kind of space that made people feel like they were sitting across from serious money. I wasn't going to be in the room. Not at first. I arrived an hour early and went to the smaller office next door. It was part of the same suite. Soundproofed. Dark. I had a laptop open on the desk with a live video feed from the conference room. The camera was built into a laptop I'd placed at the head of the table, facing the chairs where my father would sit. Marcus had told him it was for silent partners in Europe who wanted to observe. My father wouldn't question it. He didn't understand technology. To him, it was just another piece of furniture. I sat in the dark and waited. At 1:58 p.m., the door to the conference room opened. My father walked in first. He looked smaller than I remembered. His suit was tailored, but it hung a little loose on his shoulders. His hair was thinner. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but the walk was the same, confident, entitled. He tossed his coat onto a chair and sat down at the head of the table without asking. Behind him was Justin. I hadn't seen him in 7 years. He looked soft. His face was puffy. His shirt was tight across his stomach. He was carrying my father's briefcase like an assistant. He'd traded his daughter for a job. I stared at the screen and kept my hands flat on the desk. My father looked around the room and smirked. "This is a waste of money," he said. "All this glass and marble just to make venture capitalists feel important." Justin set the briefcase down and asked, "Are we sure this VM Holdings is even legitimate?" They moved fast. No due diligence. My father waved him off. "Stop sweating. They're not looking at the books. They're looking at the brand. The GBU name still means something." He leaned back in his chair and laced his fingers behind his head. "Here's the play," he said. "We take the liquidity injection, we pay off the immediate fires, and in 6 months, we refinance again. Same game, different bank." I leaned closer to the screen. There it was. He wasn't planning to fix anything. He was planning to cycle the debt, kick the can, buy time. He was a junkie looking for his next fix. My father turned to his lawyer, a younger man in a gray suit who looked uncomfortable. "Once the wire hits," my father said, "I want 50,000 moved to the Cayman account. I'm not losing the deposit on the lake house just because some suppliers are whining about invoices." The lawyer shifted in his seat. "Mr. Hall, we should wait until the counterparty." "I'm not waiting for anything," my father interrupted. "This is my company, my decision." He laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "This reminds me of my daughter," he said. "She used to worry about permits and budgets and all that small-minded garbage. Couldn't see the big picture." Justin looked down at the table. My father's voice dropped. "Don't say her name," he said quietly. Justin nodded. "She couldn't handle it," my father continued. "Couldn't handle the pressure of the life I built. She's probably waiting tables somewhere in Ohio right now, blaming me for her own failures." He shook his head. "Bad asset," he said. "A write-off." I stared at his face on the screen. A bad asset. Not a daughter, not a person. A line item that didn't return a profit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk in right then and tell him that the waitress he was mocking owned the building he was sitting in. But I didn't move. Screaming is for victims. I wasn't a victim anymore. At 2:15 p.m., I texted Marcus. "Send him in." Marcus entered the conference room without knocking. He didn't apologize for being late. He didn't offer a handshake. He simply placed a heavy leather binder in the center of the table and stood there. My father pulled the binder toward him and started flipping pages. He wasn't reading. He was scanning. Looking for one thing. The number. He found it on page 4. $450,000. He smiled. "That clears the slate with the regionals," he said. Marcus remained standing. "The line of credit is contingent on signature," he said. My father pulled a gold pen from his jacket. Mont Blanc, probably bought on credit 3 years ago. He uncapped it and held it over the signature line. Then he paused. He flipped back one page. His eyes moved across the text. My heart was pounding. He was reading Clause 14, the kill switch. "What's this about default triggering immediate acceleration?" my father asked. Marcus checked his watch. He didn't look nervous. He looked bored. "Mr. Hall," he said, "the wire transfer window for this liquidity injection closes at 4 p.m. sharp. That's 4 minutes from now." He tapped the face of his watch. "If we miss the window, the funds sit in escrow over the weekend. We'll have to re-underwrite the terms on Monday. Interest rates went up this morning. The deal might change. It was a lie. There was no wire window. I controlled the money. I could send it at midnight if I wanted to. But my father didn't know that. He knew payroll checks were bouncing tomorrow. He knew his Mercedes was scheduled for repossession Monday morning. I watched the struggle happen in real time. Greed versus caution. Fear of waiting versus fear of signing. He snapped the binder shut. "Monday's too late," he said. He turned back to the signature line and pressed the pen down. The ink flowed. He signed his name with a flourish, large and looping, the signature of a man who thought he was important. "Justin," he said. "Witness." Justin leaned over and signed below him. They had no idea what they'd just done. I sat in the dark room and watched my father close the binder. He pushed it back toward Marcus and leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. "Smart choice," he said. "Now get me wire confirmation. I want to see the funds hit before I leave this building." Marcus didn't respond. He just picked up the binder and tucked it under his arm. My father thought he'd bought himself 6 more months. Time to bleed the company. Time to move money offshore. Time to play the same game he'd been playing his entire life. But the ink was dry. The trap was shut. And I was done hiding. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked out of the small office. The hallway was quiet, carpeted. I could hear the hum of the ventilation system overhead. I stopped outside the conference room door and took one breath. Then I opened it. The room went silent. My father looked up, irritated. He didn't recognize me at first. Then he did. The color drained from his face. "Sit down," I said. Justin stood up. "This is a private meeting." "You're meeting VM Holdings," I said calmly. "Valerie Marie, so sit down." My father stared at me like I was a ghost. I walked to the other end of the table and set my bag on the chair. I didn't sit. I just stood there and looked at him. "You didn't check the LLC filing," I said. "You were so desperate for cash, you never looked at who was signing the check." My father's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Justin found his voice first. "You can't. This doesn't change anything. You bought his debt. That makes you his partner now. The contract gives him 6 months before." "The ink is dry on a fraudulent document," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I slid it across the table. My father didn't touch it. I opened it for him. Inside were 8 high-resolution photos, dated, time-stamped, taken yesterday at a repossession yard in Newark. The photos showed a chain-link lot, empty, no excavators, no cranes, just oil stains on cracked asphalt. "Page 9 of the loan agreement," I said. "The borrower warrants that all collateral is in their possession and lien-free." I tapped the photo. "You pledged equipment you didn't own. It was repossessed 4 months ago by another lender." My father's hands were shaking. "Default isn't in 6 months," I said. "It's immediate. You defaulted the second you signed." I turned to Marcus. "Execute," I said. Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He set it on the table in front of my father. "The confession of judgment," Marcus said, "allows the creditor to obtain an instant judgment upon default. No trial, no hearing, no notice. I filed the affidavit with the county clerk this morning at 9 a.m. My father looked at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. I leaned forward. "I didn't sue you," I said. "You waived that right when you signed. The judgment is entered. VM Holdings now has liens on your bank accounts, your investment accounts, and your house." Justin slammed his hand on the table. "That's illegal." "It's commercial law," I said. "And it's done." I straightened and looked at my father. "Garnishments are being served right now," I said. "Your accounts are frozen. Your cards are dead. And there's a repo truck on its way to your driveway for the Mercedes." My father's face went gray. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He sat back down hard. He looked small, suddenly small. "Val," he said quietly. His voice cracked. "I'm your father." I didn't blink. "You were my father when you forged my signature," I said. "You were my father when you ruined my credit and left me sleeping in a car 6 months pregnant. I picked up my bag. "You're not my father," I said. "You're a bad investment, and I just liquidated you." I turned toward the door. That's when Justin stood up. He was smiling. "You think you won?" he said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the table in front of me. "Emergency custody order," he said. "Signed by a judge this morning, effective immediately." I looked down at the paper. It was real. "Temporary sole custody of Lily," Justin continued. "Granted to me? The father." My stomach dropped. He stepped closer. "The order's based on an affidavit your father signed this morning. Says you're mentally unstable, dangerous. The judge acted without a hearing because of the immediate risk to the child." My father was watching me now. His face had changed. The fear was gone. There was only malice. "If I can't have your money," he said softly, "I'll destroy your life." Justin crossed his arms. "Here's the deal," he said. "Unfreeze his accounts, hand back the company, drop everything, and maybe I'll withdraw the custody petition." He tilted his head. "Or Lily leaves with me today." He thought he'd checkmated me. They both did. I looked at the custody order. Then I looked at Marcus. "What was the retainer?" I asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. $15,000. Justin nodded. "That's right. Paid in full. My lawyer's already filed the motion. You can't stop it." I looked at him. "What account did you write the check from?" I asked. Justin frowned. "What?" "The check," I said. "What account?" He pulled a folded check copy from his pocket and held it up. "Gavin's personal account. First City Bank. He covered it as part of the deal." I read the routing number on the check. Then I looked at Marcus. "That account was frozen 4 minutes ago," I said. Justin's smile faltered. "The check's going to bounce," I said. "Your lawyer won't see a dime. He won't file a single motion. He'll drop you before sunset." Justin stared at the check in his hand. I turned to my father. "You just admitted to perjury," I said. "In front of 3 witnesses, one of whom is an officer of the court." Marcus nodded. "I'm obligated to report it." The arrogance drained from my father's face. All that was left was fear. No money, no leverage, no lawyer, and a perjury investigation coming. I looked at both of them. "Leave," I said, "before I call security and have you thrown out." Justin crumpled the custody papers in his fist. He muttered something under his breath and walked toward the door. My father stayed in his chair. He was staring at me, waiting for something. Mercy, maybe. I gave him nothing. "Go," I said. He stood slowly. He didn't look at me again. He just shuffled out. A man who'd sold his soul and gotten nothing in return. The door closed behind them. I stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of their footsteps fade down the hallway. Marcus was still standing by the table. He didn't say anything. He just waited. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street below. It was cold. People were walking fast with their heads down. Traffic moved in uneven waves. "The affidavit," I said. "Can he actually be charged?" Marcus set his briefcase on the table and opened it. "Perjury in a family court filing is a criminal offense," he said. "But it's rarely prosecuted unless there's clear malicious intent and documented harm." "There's both," I said. "I know," Marcus replied. "I'll file the report with the county prosecutor by end of day. Whether they pursue it is up to them." I nodded. He closed the briefcase. "The custody order is void," he continued. "The check bounced an hour ago. Justin's attorney already sent him a withdrawal notice. I have a copy if you need it." "I don't," I said. Marcus hesitated. "Do you want me to file a counter-petition for full custody? We have grounds now: fraud, perjury, attempted parental alienation." I turned away from the window. "No," I said. "Justin will disappear on his own. He always does." Marcus studied me for a moment, then nodded. "What about the assets?" he asked. "The house, the business, the accounts. Do you want to proceed with liquidation?" I thought about it. The house was worth maybe $400,000. The business was worthless. The accounts had been drained months ago trying to cover payroll. I could take it all, sell it, recover my investment, and then some. But that wasn't why I was here. Freeze everything, I said. But don't sell. Not yet. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to hold the assets? I want him to sit with it, I said. No access, no control, just frozen. Let him feel what it's like to have his name attached to something he can't use. Marcus made a note on his pad. Understood, he said. Anything else? I shook my head. He picked up his briefcase and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, he said, that was the cleanest execution I've seen in 15 years. It wasn't about being clean, I said. He nodded. I know. Then he left. I stayed in the conference room for another 10 minutes. I sat down in the chair my father had been sitting in. I looked at the binder Marcus had left on the table. I opened it and flipped to the signature page. His name was there. Large, looping, confident. He'd signed away everything and didn't even know it. I closed the binder and stood up. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt tired. I grabbed my bag, turned off the lights, and walked out. I picked my daughter up from daycare at 5:30 p.m. She ran to me the second I walked in, holding a drawing she'd made. It was a house with a tree and a sun. That's us, she said, pointing at 2 stick figures in the yard. It's perfect, I said. I buckled her into her car seat and drove home in silence. She talked the whole way. About her friend Emma, about the crackers they had at snack time, about a song they sang. I listened to every word. When we got home, I made her dinner, pasta with butter and peas. She ate at the kitchen table while I cleaned up. After dinner, I gave her a bath. She played with her plastic cups, pouring water back and forth. I sat on the floor next to the tub and watched. Mama, she said, why are you so quiet? Just thinking, I said. About what? About you, I said. She smiled and dumped a cup of water over her head. I dried her off, put her in her pajamas, and read her 2 books. Then I tucked her in and kissed her forehead. I love you, I said. I love you too, she whispered. I turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Then I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there in the quiet. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Prosecutor's office confirmed receipt of the affidavit. They'll review and contact you if they need a statement. I typed back, thank you. Then I set the phone face down on the coffee table. I thought about my father, about where he was right now, what he was doing. Probably sitting in his house, alone, trying to figure out how it all fell apart. He'd spent 7 years telling people I was the problem, the failure, the liability. And now everyone would know the truth, not because I told them, because he'd signed it himself. I leaned back against the couch and closed my eyes. I thought about the girl I used to be, 18 years old, signing papers she didn't understand because she trusted the man who told her to. That girl was gone. And the man who killed her was gone too. What was left was just paperwork, liens, frozen accounts, a confession signed in his own hand. It wasn't revenge. It was accounting. I opened my eyes and looked around the apartment. It was small. The carpet was old. The walls were thin. But it was mine. And my daughter was asleep in the next room. Safe. That was enough. 3 weeks later, I received a call from the county prosecutor's office. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Assistant Prosecutor Linda Graves. Her voice was calm and professional. Ms. Hall, she said, we've reviewed the affidavit submitted by Mr. Marcus Chen regarding the custody filing. We'd like to take your statement. I met her the following Tuesday in a small office that smelled like old paper and coffee. She had a recorder on the desk between us and a yellow legal pad. She asked me to walk through the timeline. I did. I showed her the custody order, the check that bounced, the loan documents, the photos of the empty lot. She took notes the entire time. When I finished, she turned off the recorder and leaned back in her chair. "This is one of the clearest cases of fraudulent affidavit I've seen," she said. "But I have to be honest with you. Your father is 72 years old, no prior criminal record. His attorney will argue desperation, not malice." "It was malice," I said quietly. She nodded. "I believe you, but a jury might not. And even if we charge him, he'll likely plead down to a misdemeanor. Probation. Maybe a fine." I looked at her. "I'm not asking you to send him to prison," I said. "I'm asking you to put it on record, so the next person he tries to use knows what kind of man he is." She held my gaze for a moment, then she picked up her pen. "We'll file charges," she said. "Fraudulent statements in a court proceeding. He'll be arraigned within 30 days. "Thank you," I said. I didn't go to the arraignment. Marcus went on my behalf and sent me a summary that evening. My father had pleaded not guilty. His lawyer requested a pre-trial conference. The judge set a court date for May. I read the email once, then archived it. I didn't need to watch him in a courtroom. I didn't need to see him stand in front of a judge and lie again. The record was enough. In April, I received an email from First City Bank. They wanted to buy back the GBU loan portfolio. They offered me 75 cents on the dollar, a 15% return on my investment. I called Marcus. "They're trying to clean up their books before the quarterly earnings report," he said. "If you take the offer, you walk away with a profit and no further obligation." "What happens to my father?" I asked. "The bank restructures the debt, probably extends the terms. He gets another year or two to figure it out." I thought about it. Another year, another chance, another opportunity for him to charm someone, to lie, to shift the blame. "Decline the offer," I said. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Marcus paused. "What do you want to do with the assets?" I looked out the window of my office. It was raining. The glass was streaked with water. "Sell the business," I said. "Liquidate the equipment, sell the house, recover what I'm owed, donate the rest to a women's shelter in Newark." "Understood," Marcus said. "And Marcus?" "Yes?" "Make sure the donation is public record. I want his name on it." There was a smile in his voice when he replied, "Consider it done." The liquidation took 6 weeks. The business sold for $30,000 to a competitor who wanted the client list. The house sold for $385,000 to a couple from Pennsylvania. The equipment and vehicles brought in another $40,000. After legal fees, liens, and penalties, I recovered $448,000. The remaining $22,000 went to the shelter. The donation was made in the name of Gavin Hall. I received a thank you letter from the director a week later. She said the money would go toward expanding their housing program for mothers with young children. I put the letter in a folder and filed it away. In June, my father's case went to trial. He pleaded guilty to filing a false instrument in exchange for a reduced sentence. He was given 2 years probation, a $5,000 fine, and 200 hours of community service. Marcus sent me the court transcript. I read it once. My father's statement to the judge was 3 paragraphs long. He apologized for his actions. He said he'd acted out of desperation and fear. He said he hoped to rebuild his relationship with his daughter someday. I closed the file. There was nothing to rebuild. He'd burned it all down himself. That summer, I took my daughter to the beach. We stayed in a small rental house near Cape May for a week. We built sandcastles. We collected shells. We ate ice cream and watched the sunset from the porch. One evening, she asked me why we never saw Grandpa. I thought carefully about how to answer. "Sometimes," I said, "people make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to protect. And when that happens, it's okay to keep your distance. It's okay to build your own family." She nodded like she understood. "Are we a family?" she asked. "We are," I said. "Just the 2 of us. And that's enough." She leaned against me and watched the waves. I put my arm around her and did the same. When we got back home, I received a voicemail from a woman named Rebecca Torres. She said she'd found my name through a business contact and wanted to know if I'd be willing to consult on a debt acquisition case. Her ex-husband had forged her name on a business loan. She'd just discovered it. She didn't know where to start. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I called her back. Rebecca and I met at a coffee shop near the university. She was younger than I expected, maybe 30. She had a folder with her, thick with printed emails and bank statements. Her hands shook a little when she opened it. "I don't know if you can help me," she said, but I didn't know who else to call. I looked through the documents while she talked. Her ex-husband had used her social security number to open a line of credit for his consulting business. He defaulted 6 months ago. The bank was now coming after her for $80,000. She'd found out when she tried to refinance her car. "I can help," I said. Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't have a lot of money for a lawyer." "You don't need a lawyer yet," I said. "You need documentation. You need a timeline. And you need someone who knows how debt works." I slid a business card across the table. "Start by requesting a full credit report," I said. "Get copies of every document with your signature, then call me." She took the card and held it like it was something fragile. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. "You'll be okay. It just takes time." She left a few minutes later, walking a little straighter than when she'd arrived. I stayed at the table and finished my coffee. The folder she'd brought reminded me of the box I'd left on my father's placemat 7 years ago. Same weight, same desperation. Some people spent their whole lives using other people's names to cover their mistakes, and some people spent their whole lives cleaning up the damage. I was done cleaning up his damage, but I wasn't done helping people like Rebecca. That night, after I put my daughter to bed, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up a blank document and started typing. A guide, step by step, for people who'd had their identities stolen by someone they trusted. How to document the fraud, how to dispute the debt, how to protect yourself legally. I worked on it for 2 hours. When I finished, I saved it and sent it to Rebecca with a short note. "This might help. Let me know if you have questions." Then I closed the laptop and walked into the kitchen. I made a cup of tea. Chamomile. I stood by the window and looked out at the street. The apartment was quiet. My daughter was asleep. The bills were paid. The debt was settled. There was no drama, no chaos, no emergency, just order, just peace. I sipped my tea and felt the warmth spread through my chest. This was what winning looked like. Not a courtroom, not a confrontation, just a quiet kitchen, a sleeping child, a life I'd built with my own hands. I rinsed the cup, turned off the lights, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Rebecca. I read the guide. "Thank you. I'm going to start today." I texted back. "Good. You've got this." I got my daughter ready for school, dropped her off, and drove to my office. There was work to do, loans to review, calls to make, files to update. But as I sat down at my desk and opened my email, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Settled. My father's name no longer appeared in my spreadsheets. His debts were cleared. His damage was contained. He couldn't hurt me anymore. And more importantly, he couldn't hurt my daughter. That was all I'd ever wanted. If you're watching this, I want you to know something. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight dirty to win. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay quiet, stay patient, and let the system work for you. Build your evidence, know your rights, and when the moment comes, act with precision, not with anger, with clarity, because anger fades, but a signature lasts forever. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I want to see how far this travels. 2 more stories are coming up next that I think you'll want to hear. One about a woman who discovered her business partner was embezzling, and another about a man who found out his brother had been stealing his veteran benefits for 6 years. Both of them stayed calm. Both of them won. I'll see you in the next one.